CSS can now animate between two separate HTML pages, so a normal link can feel like a smooth app transition. You can fade between pages, slide content in and out, or even animate one image into a new position, like this. But how can we do this with just CSS? To enable cross-document transitions, you need the Add View Transition rule. Here, you apply Navigation Auto. Once you do that, you already get a default crossfade between pages. So when I have a multi-page website and click on a link, the old page blends into the new page. Now, there are a few important things. First, this will not work between two different domains, but it will work between pages on the same website, as long as both pages use the same CSS setup. That is why I use one shared CSS file for all the HTML pages in this demo. Now, how can we make this animation more interesting? First, you need to learn about a few pseudo elements. The view transition group is the shared wrapper around the page transition. Here, we use the root parameter because we want to address the entire page. Later, I will show you how we can use a different name here to animate only specific parts of the website, not the entire website. In here, we can change the animation duration to 1 second, for example, to make the default blend slower. So now the browser still uses the same default transition, but it takes longer. But what if you want a more complex view transition? In that case, you can describe your animation like any other keyframes animation. For example, a slide out. Here I animate to a translate value of -100 viewport width. So I move the old page off screen to the left. Now this animation needs to be applied to the page that is leaving the screen. For that, we need the pseudo element view transition old root. This represents the old page snapshot. So here I use animation name to assign my slide out keyframes animation. And then I just need the same thing again for the new page. So I create another keyframes animation called slide in. And here I animate from a positive 100 viewport width. So the new page starts off screen on the right and moves back into its default position. And now I need the view transition new root, which is the new page, to assign this animation name, slide in. Now, as you might have noticed, I'm using 3 different pseudo elements. On the view transition group, I define everything that has to do with the entire animation. So with both the old and the new page, like the animation duration, the timing function, and everything else I want to set up. And only the animation name, slide out or slide in, are applied to the individual pages. Now let's try this out on the browser. When I navigate to another page in my navbar, I can see my old page sliding out and my new page sliding in. It kind of feels like a single page application, but we're using separate HTML pages here. Now, one thing that annoys me about this animation is the navbar. Right now, the navbar is moving off screen, even though it exists on both pages. And for me, that just feels wrong. The navbar should stay still and only the main content should move. How can we do this in CSS? For that, we have to use a different parameter here. The root will address the entire page, but instead we can choose our own name. For example, page content. You can name this however you like. And then you address the part that you want to animate. In this example, the main content. Here I define that view transition name, page content. It has to match exactly. So here I'm creating a named transition group for the main content. And instead of animating the root, I animate this page content in all 3 pseudo elements. So if I try this out in the browser, the slide animation only applies to the main element, and the navbar stays in place. So if you want to, you can create very complex animations and give each section a different view transition name to animate them differently. But most of the time, a simple animation would probably look the best. Now that you know how to isolate certain parts of the animation, we can do the most impressive example, shared image transitions. How do we transition an element that exists on both pages? Here, I have an article image inside a card, and this is a link. So when I click on it, I get to the article page where the same header image is used again. Now I want to create a view transition where the card image crossfades into the hero image. How can we do that? This is actually easier than the slide animation, because now we only need to address both images, the card image and the hero image. Since both pages use the same CSS file, I can address them both in this selector. And then both of them get the same view transition name, article image. Now the browser creates a separate transition group for this image. It compares the old position and size with the new position and size of the image, and then animates between those 2 visual states. But since this animation looks kind of messy right now, we can comment out the sliding transitions we defined earlier, so we don't have too many things happening at the same time. Now only the article image transition will happen in the browser. If I click on the card, the image expands into the article header. Now before you start using this feature in your own projects, here are a few concerns. A view transition name has to be unique on the current page. So if you have multiple block cards, each post image needs to have their own unique transition name. For this demo, it works because I only have one card. Second issue, accessibility. Some users don't want flashy animations or big parts of the website moving around. So if they have reduced motion enabled on their device, we should respect that. That is why I would put the whole view transition setup inside this media query. Prefers reduced motion? No preference. Only if the user has not requested reduced motion, we apply these transitions. Third problem, browser support. Cross-document view transitions currently work in Chrome, Edge and Safari, not in Firefox. And during development, you can have some problems with the live server or weird glitches happening in Chrome. That is why I used Microsoft Edge in this video. But still, I would treat this as a progressive enhancement. If a browser doesn't support it, the page will simply navigate normally without a transition. So it's a nice to have feature. Now, if you like the way I teach on this channel,